So at the beginning of the stream, I talked about how there was a story or a report that came out from, I believe, the Center for Responsive Politics, which is a group that follows, that tracks money in politics and things like that. And they found that, so most politicians, they have a leadership pack. And this is something separate from like their campaign funding apparatus, and it's supposed to be for, I believe, to help other candidates and for donations to other races and things like that. But they did the report and they did the study. They looked at FEC filings and they found out that most politicians aren't even using that money for what it's supposed to be used for. They're using it as a slush fund, basically, um, and as close as you can get to just like direct bribery in our current political climate. So it made me interested. It intrigued me and made me want to look more into political expenditures, because in politics, especially this wave, this era of anti-establishment, anti-corruption politics, we've learned that one of the best indicators for how a politician is going to act when they're in Congress is how is where the money comes from. Are they taking corporate money? Are they taking money from billionaires and millionaires? And if they are, it's a safe bet that they aren't going to do anything that disrupts the status quo. They aren't going to do anything that really challenges their corporate donors, because they want to keep that gravy train flowing. So we understand that about where the money comes from, and which is part of why the Justice Democrats had such a big appeal on the left, because they weren't talking about, excuse me, they weren't taking corporate money. They said, we're not taking money from corporations, we're not taking money from billionaires and millionaires, we're going to be funded from regular working class people, poor people who believe in this political agenda, this policy agenda, and they're looking for some sort of political revolution to change the untenable status quo. That's what they were running on, right? So that gave them a level of credibility on the left, and it also made it very confusing how they aren't taking corporate money like the rest of the corporate Democrats, but yet they're just as beholden and unwilling to challenge the status quo as the rest of the politicians who take corporate money. So it was a weird paradox, and now I think we might have the answers to why it is they're still so subservient to Democratic leadership, even though they aren't taking money from them and they aren't taking money from their corporate donors. And it's because, I mean, an explanation for that is where they're spending their money. So I went through the FEC filings on open secrets for AOC, Pramila Jayapal, Ro and Ilhan Omar for the 2020 election cycle, and then this current 2022 election cycle. And I found that uh, I found that excuse me one second. I found that they spent $13 million at DNC, paid to DNC consultants. So to understand, and there's some specific expenditures that are just outrageous, indefensible, inexcusable, make absolutely no sense. But just on the principle of it, On the logic, it makes no sense. You guys are supposed to be the insurgents. You're supposed to be there to be adversarial, confrontational with Democratic leadership and with the corporate Democrats in general. So, in order to carry out your political agenda and this quote revolution, you're going to dump unholy amounts of money into the same nexus of corporate influence, which are these shitty DNC consultants. You're going to dump all the money from the grassroots into those shady institutions. And what, that's going to get Medicare for all? That makes absolutely no sense. So on logic, it makes no sense. You're putting money into these firms who have a bunch of clients, who's the majority of their clients, the majority of the money that's coming into them is to oppose your agenda, but you're giving them the money because you think they're going to provide you with the strategy to advance your agenda. That makes no fucking sense on logic right there. But then, so you have to understand who these consultants are. Because it's the consultants, they're not just like a regular old campaign staff. I mean, and there's some words to be said about campaign staff in general, but these consultants, they are just a different version of the same insiders who become like lobbyists, for example. For example, they are just career politicians, people who are supposed to be public servants, and they, while all the whole time they're in government and supposed to be working on behalf of people, they just really there maintaining the status quo and defending business as usual, and turning a blind eye to the corruption in the system. These are the insiders who are in government, working for corporate Democrats and whoever it may be. And then once they finally say, all right, fuck this government bullshit, now it's time for me to make some real bread, where the money at? And they leave the public service to join the private sector. Many of them, like I said, they will go and start their own consultant firms or join another consultant firm and basically do the bidding of corporations on the side of under the guise of providing campaign strategy to politicians. And there are so many sleazy Democratic operatives turned political consultants. In the Substack article that I wrote, Anita Dunn, who is she was Obama's communication director, White House communications director. She joined SKD Knickerbocker, which is like a big time consulting firm in DC. And in the 2020 election cycle, they got $70 million in work from the Democratic Party. And she's now the managing director at SKDK, which is the whatever. So, like, communications director goes straight to being consultant and influence peddling and making a killing there. Paul Begala used to work for Bill Clinton campaign. Now he's also a consultant, and he's on the board of the Democratic Majority for Israel Political Action Committee PAC, which is basically the Zionist pro-Israel PAC that smears anybody who's a Palestinian activist or speaks up for Palestinian rights. Those are examples of consultants participating in the revolving door. Also, Bernie Sanders and his staff, they're in on the grift too. So there was somebody, Kenneth something, who was Bernie Sanders' digital director in his 2016 campaign. Before that, he was a staffer at Bernie Sanders' Senate office. I think he was like deputy press secretary or something like that. He went and started a consulting firm, and big multi-million-dollar consulting firm, made $25 million last year. And so even the Bernie Sanders orbit, the people who are against money in politics allegedly and against all the corruption, they're in on the fucking grift too. And that consulting firm got money from a bunch of the Justice Democrats. Basically, every Justice Democrat gave money to that consulting firm. It's called Middle Seat Consulting. So it's a whole money-making operation. And the Justice Democrats are invested in the fucking grift. $13 million deep just since 2019. That's how invested they are in the grift. So, before I get any further into it, let me just give you some of the details, because like I said, the details are outrageous. With Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, $1.4 million was spent at this consultant firm, this marketing strategy group. It's the shorthand is FII, is Financial Innovation or something like that. Financial Innovation Inc. or something like that. And it's a big time marketing strategy, whatever, consulting firm in DC, works with a bunch of corporate Democrats. She gave them $1.4 million this year alone, for her merchandise brand, so that they could run her online store. So you mean to tell me people are giving her millions of dollars so that she can fight for Medicare for all, so she can defend her seat, I guess, from challengers? And she takes $1.4 million and gives it to some DNC consultants so that they could run her online store. That sounds completely above board to me. That I don't see any issues there. And in the case of AOC, her obscene campaign spending makes even less sense, because she ran an insurgent campaign against Joe Crowley and blew his ass out. I think she spent like $500,000 in the primary against Joe Crowley. She was outspent like 10-1. Joe Crowley was like the fourth most powerful Democrat in the country, and he was the head of the Queen's Democratic Party. So she was going up against the entire New York Democratic apparatus, and with just $500,000, this no-name insurgent with no name recognition unseated one of the most powerful Democrats. So you mean to tell me? So you would think that now that has the power of incumbency, now that she is literally one of the most popular politicians in the country and has over 10 million followers on Twitter, you would think she has unlimited amount of free media that she can get from new media if she wanted to, from corporate media. She controls news cycles. You would think that she'd be able to run a campaign, especially when she doesn't have any serious primary challengers. You would think she'd be able to run a campaign with less money, right? Well, the numbers say the exact opposite. She, like I said, spending unholy amounts of money on DC consultants and doing God knows what. I already talked about the $1.4 million she spent on her online store. And what do you think? How does that advance Medicare for all? I'm confused. How did that $1.4 million for a fucking merchandise store, a clothing brand, how did that secure her seat and make it so that she won't lose when she's up for re-election. Because that's what people are giving her money for. They think that she's fighting the establishment to advance a policy agenda and to protect her from losing her seat. I don't understand how a $1.4 million online store for a clothing brand does either of those things. But that's not it. She on Facebook ads alone in 2020, she spent $5 million on Facebook ads. I have no idea first of all, you spent $5 million on Facebook ads. Was that just in your district? Again, there was no serious challenger anywhere in sight for AOC. So to spend $5 million on Facebook ads for what? What are the results? What did you get out of that? So that's fucking bizarre, inexcusable, and makes absolutely no sense and is a waste of money. And then there was she gave $2 million to, I think, to Middle Seat Consulting, the firm that was started by Bernie Sanders' former staffer, and she gave money to a bunch of other, or to a couple other DNC consulting firms. And this is just AOC we're talking about. Pramila Jayapal started a PAC for Medicare for All. And almost all the money that came into the PAC went to buy ads. And another thing about ads is they are wildly ineffective. And honestly, the only reason why politicians spend so much on them is because the consultants that they hire always advise them to run more ads, because that's what the consultants do. They make the fucking ads and they run the ads. So it's like they're just advising them to do shitty strategy that's going to make them a bunch of money. So it makes no sense for regular politicians to be doing this shit. But for Justice Democrats, who with the name recognition that they have and the popular policy platform that they have, it makes absolutely no sense. Because what are you doing with the Medicaid for All PAC from Pramila Jayapal? Spent like $900,000 on ads. Who did you convince to support Medicare for All with a commercial? Who did that? Who did that work for? Like, I'm just very fucking confused. How much did that move the needle to advance single payer? Does anybody have an estimate on that? Or are we just writing blank fucking checks to DNC consultants and expecting no results? Because what the fuck is the point of that? And also, Pramila Jayapal gave hundreds of thousands of dollars to other big name DNC consultants. And again, these are incumbents with no serious challengers against them, who are the most popular politicians in the country and are running on an incredibly popular platform. Why do you need to be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on shitty DNC consultants to advise your campaign? If you wanted to hire people to hire more staff at your campaigns, or more people to do phone banking, or to knock on doors, or you wanted to organize political events for the community, get everybody out there, get everybody organized, if you want to organize direct action or whatever, that all those things make more sense and actually advance the policy agenda of the left. But this blank check to DNC consultants, I don't see what possible results they're producing if you're talking about advancing a policy agenda for the movement. So there's that. And then the most ethically dubious of them all was Ilhan Omar, who gave $2.9 million to a consultant firm, DNC consultant firm, that her husband just started. Gave $2.9 million of campaign money to her husband's consulting firm. And I mean, you want to talk about the line, like walking that fine line of just straight pocketed campaign money. That might literally be as close as you could get to breaking the law without breaking the law. And I couldn't even guarantee you that she didn't break the law, because she, at the end of 2020, she, with no explanation, she terminated all the contracts that she had with her husband's consulting firm. And that was the end of it. She's provided no explanation for it. She's provided no justification for how, in any way, that was ethical or did anything to secure her congressional seat. It just looked like a money-making operation for her husband to get a piece of the money rolling in for a campaign. So, what my takeaway from looking at their campaign expenditures and seeing how they spent 13, and these are just these 4 Justice Democrats. God knows how much the rest of them spent, and Bernie Sanders and all his presidential campaign. But my takeaway is, okay, so we've all been trying to rack our brains around what is in it for them. What are they getting out of always folding for Democratic leadership and never challenging them? And it was hard to say, because we don't see the money going into the, like, we don't see them doing paid speeches yet. We don't see them taking corporate money. So it was just hard to see what the hold that the Democratic Party has over them is. But looking at their expenditures and how invested they are in these DNC consulting firms that produce absolutely no fucking results, it's clear to me that they're playing the game just like everybody else in Washington, D.C. Now, they might not take the money from the same sources that everybody else does, but they're playing the same exact game. And they are greasing the palms of the power brokers in the Democratic Party, all the kingmakers and the people who have endless amounts of corporate money at their disposal. They're greasing their palms and giving them millions and millions of dollars to consult them on their campaigns. And eventually, they're going to get in on the action too. Eventually, there's going to be a return on their investment. There's no way that they're spending that $13 million because they think that it's going to advance Medicare for all and it's going to get us closer to Medicare for all. If you ask me, they've spent that money because they know that a time is going to come when they either get out of government or they want a promotion or whatever it is, and they are going to be looking for to suck on the teeth, to feed off of the teeth of the corporate donors in the Democratic Party. And so they want to stay in the good graces of the Democratic Party, and donating to all their consultant buddies is a great way to do it, and so is never challenging them at any consequential moments. So it's when I saw that, everything made sense to me, because I already knew that they were in it for their career. I came to that conclusion, but there was so much clarity, because there was no way that they were ever going to stop the CARES Act from going through, the largest upward transfer vote, giant corporate heist in the middle of an emergency. There was no way they were going to stop that from happening and make a scene and demand a real people's bailout. There was no way they were ever going to do that, because that would have crossed leadership in a way that would have burned that bridge for them. And when they are looking to cash in off of their maintenance and maintaining and defending the status quo, when they are looking to cash in on being good partisan Democrats, had they gone that far, that might be a career end for them. So there was no way they were going to stop the CARES Act. There was no way they were not going to lie and shill and do a little jig for Joe Biden and lie and manipulate their entire base and pretend like, oh, Joe Biden is not that bad, even though he's the architect of this rotten corporate status quo that we're all living under. There was no way that they weren't going to do that again, because they will do anything to stay in the good graces of the Democratic Party. So there was no way that they weren't going to do that. They have $13 million invested in their lucrative future careers in the Democratic Party, and they weren't going to risk that by not lying for Joe Biden. So what's what they're going to do? They're going to come out and lie for Joe Biden, because bitch, the check's going to clear if I do that. There was no way that they were going to remove Nancy Pelosi from her seat as Speaker of the House and force a vote on Medicare for all, because that would have been rocking the boat too much. Democratic leadership and the Democratic establishment would never forgive them for that. So that was never an option on the table. Everything makes so much sense now, because, like I said, they are as committed to playing this game, the corrupt, dirty money game in politics, as anybody else. And it's even more egregious because at least the rest of these corrupt politicians have the decency to beg their corporate masters to fund their career ambitions and their lucrative endeavors. These Justice Democrats, they defrauded us out of millions of dollars, and then they used the money that they pretended that they were going to fight for us with. They used that money to buy into the corrupt political machine. I don't know if you guys, anybody here plays poker, but that was their buy-in. All of our donations, that was their buy-in, and they're buying in at these cash. They're putting their money in. Their seat at the table is spending ungodly amounts of money at these consultant firms, and putting money directly in the pockets of some of the power brokers and wheelers and dealers in the Democratic Party that are these shady consultants. So I think it's wild. I know nobody else is talking about this because I wrote the article, the one and only article on this, and published it on Substack today. The link to that will be in the description box. I have to change the link. There's a link to another Substack article in the description box. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on that. If you guys appreciated the findings, and I will be doing more reporting, I guess, on some of these campaign finance issues when it comes to the Justice Democrats, because I don't think enough scrutiny's been paid to where the money's coming from and where it's going with these Justice Democrats. Everybody, they said, oh, we're not taking corporate money, and nobody, they just got to pass. They just got to pass, and everybody gives them the benefit of the doubt that they are good, kind-hearted people, only in it to help everybody. But that's not the case, and you can always the money always tells the actual story. So there will be more of that from me. If you guys want to help support that, you could sign up in my Substack. Substack's free for everybody, but I always have the option to pay if you want. Patreon, PayPal, all of those links are in the description. There's also a link to a GoFundMe for a place that it could permanently record and work and things like that. So let me see what's happening in the chat. Zani2 says, "Speak for yourself, don't tell. I don't know where the money comes from. I barely know how to find enough to keep death of despair away from my doorstep. USA, USA, USA." Uh, Maxwell McIsaac says, "I really appreciate your willingness to address the deep state unapologetic." Um, this lobbyist cycle is the deep state, is a corruption. Yeah. I think they're playing a game out in the open, and they're hoping that, and it works, so it's not really hoping. This is a tried and true strategy, which is they do it out in the open, but it's so many layers to it that if you really are looking for something, you can find it. It'll take you some time to find it, but they're banking on the fact that most people aren't gonna go through all those layers of digging to find out just how corrupt this whole thing is. And honestly, I don't know how it would happen or when it would possibly happen, but at some point, somebody's gonna blow the lid on this whole consultant grift going on. Because, I mean, there's an argument to be made that the reason that corporate money in politics and campaign spending is so out of control, it directly connected to these consultants, because they're the ones who keep running up the prices, because they just write blank checks for themselves and the campaign just write give it to them. And then their whole strategy is just buy more ads. Come to me, give me more money so I can make more ads, and then I'll run more ads. So the campaign finance system in this country is so artificial, and all of that money is going to the campaigns, not to the campaigns. All of that money is going to the consultants. Because you have to understand, people talk about campaign donations and they're like, oh, you take corporate money, all this corporate money is going to your campaign. And they act like it stops there, but that's not where it stops. That money has to go somewhere. And that money goes to the pockets of these consultants. In the Substack article that I wrote on this, I added the clip of Nomiki Konst from when she was speaking at the DNC Reform Commission, and she was going in about the consultants and how much the DNC was paying consultants. She said in the 2016 election cycle, the DNC spent anywhere between $700 and $800 million on the top 5 consultants at the Democratic Party. Almost $1 billion to 5 consultants. There is no way there's nothing you can say to me to convince me that was ethical. There's nothing you can say to me to convince me that's all above board. And it would take a hell of a lot of convincing to convince me that that was completely legal. So there is a whole underground of these lobbyists and there's different levels and to the consultant grift, because I've only been talking about the political consultants, the people who consult on campaigns, but there's a whole other grift of consulting for industry and corporations. And so people who are in public service, politicians, when they get out of government, they'll go start their own they'll do like Tony Blinken did. So now he's Biden's Secretary of State, but before then he was a top aide to Biden. He was a top aide at George W. Bush White House, and he was a key figure in lying us into the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War. So he helped lie us into these wars. The whole time he was in government, he helped continue those wars, make sure they continued unabated. And then as soon as he gets out of government, he starts a consulting firm where he helps secure contracts for defense contractors. So he helps get the contracts. He acts as a middleman between the defense contractors looking for a contract for whatever, to build missiles or build whatever military equipment for the government. And he just trades in off of his influence and the people that he knows at the Department of Defense, people he knows in Congress. And he secures, through his corruption, these contracts for his clients, which are defense contractors. So that type of consulting is, honestly, I think that's even worse than the grift around campaigns, because you are just directly serving these corporations and cashing in off of your previous unethical behaviors, and you're cashing in off of the connections that you still have to people in government, and you're also cashing in on the fact that the door is always open. So all those clients that Tony Blinken had at his consultant firm, well, they hit the fucking jackpot because the person that they were paying millions of dollars to turned around and become the Secretary of State, and is going to grant them even more contracts and do whatever the fuck else that they want. So I mean, there is this. I'll just say this stage is ripe for some bombshell expose and document dumps and leaks on what's actually going on with these consultants. Boy, that was a fucking tangent, wasn't it? Charlie Brown's Rebellion says social conditioning services ain't cheap, apparently. Yeah. And honestly, I don't even think those ads work because people don't aren't convinced by it. And it's just something that I mentioned when I wrote that article. The obsession with these ungodly campaign ad buys, there's an argument to be made it was a grift from the beginning from these consultants, these media consultants who were just trying to pad their wallet. Honestly, I think that's the most logical explanation for it. But even if the most charitable spin that I could put on it is that for all of those uninteresting, uninspiring corporate Democrats who have absolutely nothing to offer voters, spending millions of dollars on ads is like a cheap shortcut. Well, it's not really cheap, it's very expensive. It's like a shortcut to manipulate just enough voters to come out and vote for you. Not because they think that you're going to do anything, not because they like your policy platform, just because you've bombarded the public with your name so much that when they're in the booth, they see your name and like there's like some fucking primitive connection to all the ads that they saw, and they just vote for you. That's the best, most charitable interpretation I could come up with for why consultants are so heavy on these political ads. A cheap trick to manipulate some voters. But it doesn't like I said, that doesn't convince people, that doesn't move people, that doesn't excite people, it doesn't inspire people, it doesn't inform people. So it makes absolutely no sense why the Justice Democrats are doing it. Like, if you're allegedly leading a movement, you don't recruit people to your movement through commercials. That's not how it works. You're not gonna, like, and with Premier Jack Paul's Medicare for All, like, what did $900,000 in Medicare for All ads even look like? Was it just those like little clips on YouTube videos, or like what could you have possibly gotten out of it? It makes no sense, and that's what I'm saying. The only explanation is, and there's no way you think that $900,000 in ads is more effective at advancing Medicare for All than doing direct action and organizing direct action to confront the leadership of the Democratic Party, or withholding your vote in the speaker's race until you get a vote on Medicare. There's no way you think spending $900,000 on ads is more effective at advancing Medicare for All. So like I said, it just seems like they're in on the grift, and that's their buy-in. Turbo GG says, "How much more boutique left can you get than a gallon assist tax surge?" Yeah, yeah. And honestly, that shit just seemed like a fucking cheap marketing gimmick to promote her brand. To be real with you, because it's the same font that's in her merchandise store. So she did this whole thing, created all this controversy. She says, "Oh, because I want to raise awareness to tax it." Bitch, taxing the rich has been an overwhelmingly popular position in this country forever, my entire fucking life. Because everybody knows the rich don't pay taxes. Everybody knows corporations don't pay taxes. You don't need to convince people that that's the policy that we need in this country. So this whole idea of, oh, she wore it to promote the policy, that sounds like bullshit. More than anything, it looked like she was just promoting her own fucking brand. Turbo GG says they're playing the long game. That's exactly what they're doing. They know that at some point there's going to be return on their investment. At some point, them or somebody in their staff is going to start their own consulting firm or media company, whatever it is, and they're going to fucking cash in. And they want to be in the good graces of all the people handing out money in the Democratic Party. That's why they're spending all these money with these consultants. And that's why they will never challenge them at consequential moments when it matters. Zanitu says, that's true. Corporate Dems are at least getting money from corporations. The fraud squad shakes down poor people $27 at a time. No, but for real though, it is fucking gross. I try to avoid throwing around like legal terms and because they carry a certain amount of weight. I've for months I've been struggling to see how what they're doing isn't just outright fraud. I don't know how this doesn't count as them defrauding millions of people in this country, because they're doing one thing, have no intention of following up or following through on it. And in fact, they're doing the exact opposite. AOC will give your money straight to corporate Democrats. And when she's not doing that, she spent hundreds of millions of dollars to give it to other corporate Democrats running consulting firms. What the fuck is this? You might as well just give your money straight to the DNC. Cut out the middleman. Just give your money to the DNC.